Most traders think they need to trade every day. This week I only took one trade. This one on Bitcoin on Friday, the last day of the week. And that was enough for me for my week because trading is not about how many trades you take. It's about waiting for your setup and waiting for the right trade, even if it has to take the whole week. There was, in my opinion, a lot of trades to trade this week, but they happened either when I wasn't at my laptop or just the overall market conditions were just not good enough to convince me to enter the setups. And I didn't even hold that trade for too long. When I was happy with my profit, I closed it and I moved on. Because the time you spend at the chart is very valuable as well. I was already 3 hours into my session. I held that trade for another 2 hours almost. It's enough for a day. So let's break down exactly what I saw this week and how that trade played out. The way I work is Thursday to Thursday. So this week I was working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. When I do so, I can only trade the UK session. On Monday, it was very easy. I'm just going to put on Bitcoin because it's just simpler. We'll keep Ethereum on the side just so got a bit of context. But in my UK session on Monday, nothing happened. Nothing crazy happened here. No trade. It was a very messy environment to start the week. Didn't see anything good, so I just stayed out. I was here attending the session, but didn't look into anything. Tuesday, it was a potential setup here. The thing is, I finished work later than usual. At this time of the year, I usually manage to finish at 5:15. By the time I get home, it's usually around 6. I still worked a little bit later that day, so I think I got at the chart after this candle. I actually like the setup better on Ethereum. You had your high in US, first drop in Asia, and when we created this low, you sort of have a W here. It's a good setup when you have a W that doesn't push and holds the EMA to keep going for another level. And then I was expecting a second level on the 15-minute, which is, this was a nice entry, retest of the EMAs. That W failing to go higher and creating an M is a good sign to enter. This was as well mid-range of Monday. So create your range, break below the 50% of that range and reject it. So it was a nice trade to take, probably around here. If I drop down to the 5-minute, they could have taken target the lows of Asia, good 2.3 all trade. I arrived after this, and here my cutoff time is about 8:30. So we had this little range, but if I drop down onto the 5-minute, you can see how this candle here could have been your entry after the M. From here to your stop loss all the way here, decent trade to Asia lows. And then what happened next is I wasn't had a chart here anymore at 9 p.m. I need to eat and I need to go to work on the next day. But rejecting Asia lows 3 times, so create a triple top. You got to break down, you retest that zone, lower high, that's your entry. In here, there was another trade to take. It's a bit more difficult. This is why I don't trade this extension, because usually you get manipulation. You can get trap moves as well. This resulted into a good trade if you were to take this one. On Wednesday, that's in Asia, when Bitcoin swept the low of previous week and was holding this supply. And that day, it was actually 2 good trades. If I zoom in a bit, there's 2 good trades to take, either on Bitcoin or Ethereum. Same, you see a really similar price action. Bitcoin was a bit better because of this breaker. But if you jump onto the 2-minute, which we will do, there was a long to take here after a retest of a breaker into that supply. There's a good long here to take. And but then potentially even after, when we did retest that supply, that information breaking down lower. I would even say that the setup was even better on Ethereum. The M was a bit better under the EMAs, 50% of Asia, target those lows. I find it pretty rare that you get 2 really good setup within a session. I know that if I miss a setup at the start of the session, most of the time I can just close the laptop and come back later because I'm not going to get another setup that good. And then you might be inclined to revenge trade as well and get the next trade because you missed this one and you're a bit pissed off. But I don't think I mentioned it. Wednesday, I didn't trade because Wednesday was my last day of work and we went for a drink after work. So was drinking, didn't trade UK. That's when we had 2 good setups. It is what it is. You need to find that balance in trading. You can't trade all the time. It takes a real toll on your mental capacity, physically as well. The stress, like I used to have pain in my back for just being too stressed at the charts. And at some point, you want to find that freedom and work-life balance. And as much as you want to work as hard as possible on trading, spending too much time and just focusing only on trading will just make you too tired to execute properly on trades. So far in my week, 3 days gone by, I still didn't take a trade. And it was actually good setups in those UK session after work. This is actually the long I was talking about in UK on the 2-minute time frame. We were still retesting this demand, and what Bitcoin did is swept those lows, moved higher. You have a nice breaker here. This should actually be great. And here you can notice the retest. So there was a long here. If you entered here below the breaker, that's usually where I put my stop, and targeting either those highs if you're conservative, which is the 800 EMA as well. 1.3 hour trade to that supply was a good 2-hour trade. If you were a bit more aggressive, which you could be a time and entered of that little hammer, still stop loss all the way below the breaker. That's a 3.6 hour trade, and to that EMA, it was a 2.5 hour trade, which is amazing as well. And then here you have your retest and your aim for a play short, whether you entered off that hammer or once we actually broke below 50% of the Monday's range. Let's say of this one. Second high, if you want, best for risk to reward and target those lows we just had before. There's a 3-hour trade here. If you had your stop loss all the way up there, which is probably better, 1.5-hour trade, which does for me as well. So now let's go to Asia on Thursday. So a session I was actually trading. I was a bit lost here into where we were in the model. I could see definitely, even if this could be W, rise level 1. This was on the 1 hour actually. This was a nice W on the 1 hour, rise level 1, expect rise level 2. But at the same time, we were respecting this supply here that I had on my left. We just took that liquidity. So it was really hard for me to have a reason to go long. And all I was looking at is sometimes you have a range that get created. So here, those pink lines, the high gets taken, the low gets taken, and usually wait for a retest of 50%. And here, I was looking of potential shorts. The thing that happened is after those two inverted hammers, you had this hammer the other direction, retesting some minor demand here that created that fair value gap. A demand that creates a big displacement usually gets retested. That's exactly what happened here. And then we held above. So it was a trade here. I just didn't feel confident enough to re-enter this, especially after tapping that supply and grabbing that liquidity, that a long would make sense, and we could have the potential of an M forming here as well to have a bit more of a retrace. But we didn't retrace, we just ranged, and I didn't take any trade on this setup. And then UK was very similar. Once again, we had trap traders, we had that potential M forming that I was looking at for a bit more of a retrace. We were holding those trap traders, exact same thing on Ethereum. So at that point, I wasn't really looking for longs, even though you could say that we held 50% of Asia, got back above the EMAs, and here retested the EMAs. So saying was potential long from here, stop loss here or down there to the high of previous day, 50% of the previous week, and the Asia highs. So at this point, still very patient. It's Thursday. I've had missed opportunities because I wasn't at the charts early in the week. And then I've had my full Thursday where the market wasn't ideal, in my opinion, like this. And I couldn't justify us moving up straight away now. It was too risky, in my opinion. So just refrain myself and just been patient. That at this point, I was probably thinking that I wasn't going to take any trade this week. I quite hate, it's not that I hate, dislike a little bit the weeks where I work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and have Thursday and Friday off, because usually Friday is a bad day for trading. Try to not get involved too much. I've been hurt in the past. And so, yeah, like the week coming is a week I'll like a lot more because I have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which for me are really good opportunity days. Friday, being very cautious. I thought we might get a pivot in the week, and same, we had those highs, possible information. The levels were not all that nice and clean to me. I didn't find it in Asia good enough to go for longs and to short that environment. Bitcoin was actually holding the 200, but it was staying below the 50 and the 20 here. And what I looked at on Ethereum is, like I said before, a demand zone that create a big displacement. This displacement here gets recovered, and then we retest that zone pretty well actually with that M formation. I was thinking of entering here, but the fact that we were holding 50% here of that candle on a higher time frame, and Bitcoin was making a lower high as well, it was difficult to go long at that spot. And then same half of my session in Asia, which is 3 hours in, is about 1:30 p.m. It was actually just before this retrace, and because I didn't want to enter here, I didn't want to stay for this retest and potentially go long. And actually, we just spent so much time down there and wasn't at the chart anymore. But it's pretty much a little bit like my setup on Friday that I took long. Nice W into demand, breaks the 50, and then instead of just retesting and moving, it just had a long grind here, but it was holding it. And if you were trading the second half of the Asian session, there's definitely a long in that area. Stop loss here, targeting those highs. Good trade in here as well. So now we're on the UK session. I came into UK with not a lot of expectations. I realized I missed this trade here on Ethereum in Asia, and we're still holding bullish from that point. So with the trend, this one here in Asia, very similar price action. If you look at it this way, let me remove all these drawings. See, this W, retest of the 50, so line up, W, retest of the 50, so similar, move up. So when we were approaching this level, I knew that we were going to break to the upside. Just been very patient and waiting for my 3-hour mark, which is usually the liquidity injection, which clearly happened here, like 8:30 here is that candle, and that's where I entered my trade. So here's my trade. I could have had my stop here, but because I know I want to be more conservative at the moment, I left my stop under the second peak. I went break even to those highs in case we were actually creating a top and we were going to reverse from here. I think like 2-3 weeks ago, I did a mistake like this where price went to my break even, didn't take profit and retraced to my stop loss. But that target here to that supply on a very higher time frame made a lot of sense. So I entered this trade, absolutely zero drawdown, moves up straight away. I hit, make this bigger a little bit. I hit my break even point. My stop loss has moved to break even here. Then we keep grinding up. We create this W here, retesting some demand, retesting 50% of the previous week. So this was all really bullish. And then we failed to break the high of previous days straight away. And that demand after this big move was a bit of my invalidation point. Plus we were entering this area, which is the UK extension before US. And I've said in my rules that I need to close a position. I usually don't hold positions over many sessions. It can happen, but I need to close my positions before the UK extension because most of the time I'll get wiped out. So I dragged my stop loss here because at this point, when we had this big move and consolidation, this was a 1R result. And I'm like, I'll put my stop loss there. If I close my week with a 1R on a Friday, I'll be more than happy. It's a green, it's one win. And I've been patient the whole week. I just bank some greens. So at this point, I moved my stop loss up. We had a really sharp hammer retesting that zone on the 2-minute. I won't go down to it now, but I'll put my stop right below the wick of that candle. And I've let the trade play out and just got stopped out here at 1.6 R. The thing is, this trade was actually phenomenal because no drawdown, and it actually went straight to my target, to the T. My target was at 62,262, and that candle went to 62,262.9. The thing is that at this point, Ethereum wasn't holding this and was already breaking down. Being in the extension before the US session, like I just said, I was exactly worrying about this. That happened after it hit my potential take profit. Because this zone was a big consolidation before this big displacement, this is a zone that was very high likely going to get retested at some point. And that was my break-even point. And I just wanted to bank money instead of entering a trade, which was already 3 hours into my session, 2 hours into the trade. So it's the trade I was dragging. But yeah, I was worrying about the extension being volatile, tapping me out before going to my take profit. So got out there, secured my trade, secured my money for the week, happy, went to bed, and was more than happy about it. So this is my trade for this week. This is all the trades I took on that evaluation account. I'm sitting at about 3% profit so far on the account. You know, I risk 0.5% per trade now, which gives me a bigger buffer. If I have a 5% drawdown limit, I have my risk, so I got 10 losing trades in a row before I blew the evaluation. And my goal is to get above 3%, and then I'll risk my full 1% risk again to climb to my target of 12%. So if I get another winning trade from here, then my risk will be up to $500 instead of 250. So we're continuing on to the winning streak. It's good. I looked back into my TradeZilla. That's why it's so good to have TradeZilla, to be able to look back at all your trades. The last time I had 3 consecutive wins in a row was in October last year. So it's been a while. It feels good. I'm on good momentum, so hopefully it keeps going. It was really a week of testing and patience, and this is how trading works. I allowed myself some time as well in my personal life to enjoy the simple things. I didn't have really any pressure to perform, and I was just waiting for that smack in the face trade. And this is the one that happened on Friday, and this is the two I took last week were exactly same mindset. The setup was there, it was obvious. I wasn't doubting, it wasn't another option that could play out, and then it just worked out. And this, guys, is a perfect trading week in my book, being patient and accepting that you don't have to trade every day. I'll see you guys next week, and thanks for watching again.